First became introduced to the issue of human trafficking when a student in her class was trafficked. And this was a 14-year-old girl. And I still remember that girl.
Do you have a sister friend who you can talk to about your imperfections, vulnerabilities, uncensored truths, journeys, and victories? Welcome.
So, welcome back to the Sisters Let's Talk podcast lounge. I am Lucia
I'm Fumi.
and today, well, first of all, happy new year to everyone. Happy 2025, which
Woohoo!
I feel like it's gone. 2024 went by so fast. I'm still writing 2024 at work.
Yeah.
But today, as we start off the new year, if you've been listening to the podcast or watching on our YouTube channel, we've been talking about child sex trafficking. We've had guests that's come on, which we'll talk about later, those previous episodes. But today we were privileged to have a guest speaker that we will introduce. Her name is Janet Campbell, and she is the CEO of the Joy Smith Foundation. So, as we're gonna get into it, I'm gonna turn over to Fumi because she has her breakout challenge that she gives, which I never know what she's gonna give sometimes. But then we'll introduce our actual topic today.
Well, welcome, Janet. Welcome to the Sisters Let's Talk podcast.
Great
We're
to be
so
here.
happy to have you here.
Well, thank you for the invite.
Yes. So, we play a game on the Sisters Let's Talk podcast. I like words, so Lucia just gets along with it. Um, but we're starting this year with talking about identity, right? So, identity of the aplomb woman, this daring and confident woman that just shows up in a space that nobody expects her to, but she thrives, right? What does the word identity make you think about? And we're all going to answer that. So we'll start with you. What does the word identity make you think about?
Oh, wow. Lots is going through my mind, but I love the sentiment that you mentioned with respect to, that woman that's just showing up and is so powerful and really empowered and independent and just really in charge of whatever she's pursuing. For me, that's something when I think about identity, it's something that I've always really valued myself is to have that independence and really to define what the future holds for me. So that's something I think about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How about you, Lucia? What does identity make you think about?
Um, I think of one word, acceptance.
Mm.
Acceptance in what I can do and what I cannot do. That is part of identity for me.
So for me, identity means vulnerability and fluidity. It means that I don't have to be this stagnant person every time. I can be fluid in how I perceive myself depending on the environment that I am. I can adapt. I can fit in as well as I can be independent. I can be vulnerable to myself. Um, and I can be vulnerable to others because that brings out me. But it also establishes a ground on which I stand, whether it's my faith, whether it's the support that I have, or who I'm around. But it gives me the chance to be me.
Mm.
Um, that what identity means for me.
I think that's actually a good segment to what we're going to be talking about today. We all kind of actually gave some of those words that we want to answer today for our audience. So the broad topic is child sex trafficking, but what we want the audience to take from it is in terms of how can we keep children safe? How can we be support? How can society be a support, whether it's to the parents as well as to survivors? So, how can we be a support to survivors? And how can survivors be accepted? How can they feel that acceptance? Because obviously, there comes vulnerability. Sometimes your independence is taken from you. So, this is what we would like to answer today. And this is why we have Janet Campbell here today. So I'm just going to go right into it and just give the audience who we have on. Obviously, we know her name as Janet Campbell. So she is the president and CEO of the Joy Smith Foundation. For those of you in the States or elsewhere, this is a foundation in Canada. This is a position she has held since 2021. Janet has been a driving force behind the foundation's growth, expanding its reach nationally and forming key partnerships in the fight against human trafficking. She is deeply inspired by the resilience of survivors and is passionate about raising awareness. And I believe this is also stemming from your mother as well. She has spearheaded initiatives like the See the Trafficking Signs campaign and the National Human Trafficking Education Center. Janet was also honored to represent Canada in the U.S. Department of State's International Visitors Leadership Program in 2023. With her extensive leadership experience in technology and service based industries, she brings a fresh, innovative approach to tackling the issue of human trafficking in Canada. And I would assume you also end up having some impact internationally to focus on survivor rehabilitation and public education. So in this podcast, the Sister Led podcast, we believe that in the power of learning from each other and building communities that lift each other, and we believe that your foundation is a perfect example of how resilience, leadership, and community can spark change. So we say again, welcome to the Sisters Let's Talk podcast, Janet.
Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Every day, people are lured and exploited, forced to work against their will. Joy Smith was a school teacher when her student was trafficked. She was inspired to take action and start the Joy Smith Foundation in her home. Today, the foundation is a 3-generational organization continuing Joy's fight against trafficking. The Joy Smith Foundation unites people and breaks down barriers for survivors. They work to raise awareness of human trafficking and suppress traffickers' methods. In the battle against human trafficking, there is no room for bystanders. Join the Joy Smith Foundation and be a part of the solution. Visit our website, joysmithfoundation.com, to learn more and get involved.
Well, thank you for having me here.
So, Janet, I'll start off with the first question. On your website, it says Joy was a mother of 6 and a school teacher. My mom was a school teacher too. So I feel like we're sisters already. First became aware of human trafficking when one of her students were being trafficked.
That's
That
right.
is wild. Could you tell us more about the story? What happened? Like how, I want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So the namesake of the foundation is
Mhm.
my beautiful mother, Joy Smith. And my mom is a real force, and she's also a history maker here in Canada. She, as a school teacher, first became introduced to the issue of human trafficking when a student in her class was trafficked. And this was a 14-year-old girl. And I still remember that girl. And in fact, this particular experience just sparked something that continues to impact our family. Today, we actually are 3 generations that are dedicated to our life's work on preventing this from happening and supporting survivors in their healing journey. And so, following her years as a teacher, she actually went on to be a member of parliament here in Canada. And back in those days, which was not that long ago, she learned that there were no laws for somebody who would buy and sell a child in Canada. There was not a specific law for that. And so, where she made Canadian history is she passed a private member's bill. So when somebody is arrested and charged with child trafficking in Canada, it's a result of that work. And yeah, it's something she, as a private member's bill, is so rare. In fact, when she did that, she was only the 15th member since Confederation to amend the Criminal Code of Canada. And she went on to pass a second bill, a Bill C-310. And when she did it a second time, she became the only parliamentarian in history that's ever amended our criminal code. And so this is very much a life's passion. Pardon me, I'm just recovering from a cold. But when she was leaving Parliament, we started the foundation, and we started the foundation to be able to continue the work, to prevent it and to support those in their healing journey. So yeah, that's a little bit about the foundation and how we got here.
So, if I may ask, if maybe you could give us a synopsis of this 14-year-old and how your mom actually ended up um, knowing that she's been trafficked.
Yeah. So back in that time, it did look a little bit different than it may look today.
Right.
But there are some things that are still continue to be quite similar. So in that particular case, what happened was she just noticed a change in this student, this very bright, engaged, intelligent student became more withdrawn and started to experience more truancy in school and started to really struggle with her grades. And as we learned, this girl, the reason for her disappearance is that she was being trafficked. And one of the things in that time, actually, she did continue to live at home when she was being trafficked. And so that is something that oftentimes people believe that they have to be kidnapped or they have to be moved. And that's not always the case. We actually have quite a number of cases because we've now worked on over 7,000 files since that initial case in my mom's classroom through to today. And we have several cases where the victims have continued to live at home during their period of trafficking.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, obviously, your mom being a teacher and Fumi's mom being a teacher, you hone education. Knowledge is power. We hear that all the time. Ignorance is bliss. Although I say ignorance, it really isn't bliss because um, there are consequences, right?
What you don't know will kill you.
Exactly. So,
Sometimes.
your foundation is very education is one of the things that you provide to not just to parents but to society in general, like you provide to parents, people at frontline workers. So what are some of the red flags that for our audience, we will have a lot of parents, right? Because as we said, this was one of the things that someone mentioned that she was worried about, a parent. What are some of the red flags that we should be looking out for? Whether they're teachers, actually, this lady specifically is a teacher and a parent. So, what are some of the red flags that we should be looking for as
Okay.
parents, teachers, caregivers?
Such a great question. And we really do believe that education is our greatest weapon. It is our greatest weapon to be able to prevent this from happening to anybody. And it is also our greatest weapon in helping with the healing and the intervention of and disruption of this particular crime. So when it comes to, I think one of the first things I'd like to do is paint a bit of a picture of one of the most common ways in which trafficking happens, because it's not always what people believe it to look like. And then maybe I can outline some of the flags and it will help to give some perspective.
That'll
So
be awesome. Yeah.
often what happens in these cases, not all the time, there are different ways in which it happens, but a big majority of the cases, especially with youth in school, starts off because they meet somebody new. They meet somebody new, and this person can be a friend. It could be a romantic interest, or it could be like a new friend group. So there are new people that come into their lives, and in that, they start to build a relationship and they develop trust, and they get to know the individual's vulnerabilities. They get to know, really how to make that individual feel special. And like nobody understands them in the way that their new friend or romantic interest does.
Right.
And once they gain that trust, they will use what they've learned with their vulnerabilities against them, quite frankly. And they can be put in compromising positions where ultimately they can end up being exploited and then trafficked. And it happens quickly, but almost without sometimes you realizing what's happening. It can kind of sneak up. So when it comes to red flags, it's really about paying attention to those new people that enter your child's life. It's paying attention to the new friends, and that includes online, by the way.
Yeah.
Because more and more of our cases, they are meeting their predators online. And there are studies that demonstrate that somebody can be convinced, a child can be convinced to go meet a predator in a very, very short period of time. And so a lot of things can happen very quickly in that instance. So really pay attention to who your child is interacting with. Another thing to watch for is when you see your child going through changes. Now, growing up, it's natural to go through changes,
Right.
but it's really about looking at the changes and looking, does it make sense? So, are they changing how they dress and look? Are they changing how they act? Does this correspond with them hanging out with new friends? Do they suddenly have new things that you're not sure where they came from? So these could be fancy purses or clothes or jewelry, because often predators will shower their targets with all sorts of things that maybe their parents can't afford to buy for them. And again, the victim ultimately just thinks that they've won the friendship lottery or the relationship lottery,
Yep.
because they're being treated so well. So pay attention to that. If you start to see that grades are dropping, or maybe they were interested in sports and no longer they're interested in sports, these are things that are huge red flags. And one thing that often teachers are surprised to learn about is 2 cell phones. If they ever see a student with 2 cell phones, that is a huge red flag. So all the things that I've talked about in and of themselves don't mean that somebody is being trafficked,
Right.
but they start to paint a picture that something is going on. I need to really understand further. The one flag that could stand on its own is the two cell phones. If you ever see a child that has two cell phones, that's really something that you want to understand pretty quickly, because that's not a normal thing for a child to have two cell phones.
Wow. I've never thought about the two cell phone one. Because like some of these, like yeah, we mentioned it in couple of the episodes we did earlier. But yeah, that is a really big one. And it's I'm just so glad that you went over them. So at least like you deal with them every day. Like we basically just read them online, but it is really nice to be able to bring those back up. So thank you so much for bringing out those red flags. One thing I read on your website, and this is I believe is a review or something that somebody wrote after a workshop that you do, like your organization does. And I'll read it and then I'll ask my question after that. It says, I am very grateful that the Joyce Smith Foundation presented to my class, which I think is just awesome that you go into schools, like go where the problem is. As students came A student came up to me afterward and told me that her brother had introduced her to a group of guys who were turning her out for sex every Saturday night. That is scary.
Yeah.
She was afraid to tell anyone until she heard the presentation. I'm now dealing with the student through the foundation to help her and her parents restore her mental and physical health. And the most crazy part, it is a teacher of a grade 7 student. My son is in seventh grade. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Um, how can we, aunties, uncles, parents, society in general, better support child sex trafficked survivors in their journey of healing and living fulfilled lives without letting this thing define them? I'm thinking that we're talking about identity. How don't do we help them heal so that this incident don't define the rest of their lives? What does your how does your foundation help in this healing process?
Yeah, so I think it's important as people start to understand and grow in their knowledge of this issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shift that happens where,
Mm,
um, historically, what we've seen is often the victim sort of is sort of blamed or shamed
mm-hmm.
for what has happened.
Yep.
And trust me, survivors carry all this shame and blame on their own. They don't need the community or their loved ones around them to pile onto that. But one thing I want to be really clear about is, in fact, this is a crime.
Mm-hmm.
We would not blame or shame somebody who experienced some other kind of crime. And this
Exactly.
really should not be treated any differently. And
Mm-hmm.
as people grow in their knowledge and understanding, that is paramount of importance. That people are supported as a victim of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And survivors do carry a lot of blame and shame on their own. It's part of the trauma that they've experienced. They are not responsible for what has happened to them, because
Right.
nobody should prey on them. It is not their fault. But it is a very common and natural tendency to carry that shame and blame when something like this has happened. So
Mm,
I think starting there, as a society, we need to look at this particular issue for what it is.
mm-hmm.
It is somebody preying on an innocent victim, and it is a crime.
Yep. Yep. That
So,
is well said.
what are some so for example that that grade 7 girl or any other child, where are some places that they can go, whether it's a safe space or if it's a number they can call that they can talk? If they cannot, obviously we would like them to be able to talk to their parents, etc. but sometimes that's not the case, right?
Sometimes the
Because
parents are the issues.
are
I
the
think it's just
issue,
It's true.
or they feel like
crazy.
they're afraid I've
Yeah.
done something wrong and I'm gonna be in trouble,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right? So what are some resources available that parents can use, and as well as survivors or victims can use? They might be in it or they are now out of it. How can we get help? How can they get help?
Yeah. So definitely that will vary regionally for
Mm-hmm.
your listeners. But in general, what I would say is that the school environment is a very wonderful resource for any child to identify a safe adult within that environment that they can connect and talk to. If, they are needing help and for whatever reason they can't speak with their parents. And it's a great place for parents to connect with as well, and really be partners in working with your child hand in glove with the school and the school environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's critically important. If
Mm-hmm.
ever there is concern that a child's safety or something like this is going on, I do encourage people to contact their local authorities. The local authorities will also be able to direct you to applicable local resources that can help and support. And people sometimes are concerned about contacting law enforcement because there's a whole host of reasons where they're concerned, and sometimes people haven't had great experiences.
Right.
But what I would say is that you won't always know what law enforcement specifically is doing in your case, but that information can be incredibly valuable. And we've had so many cases that have broken wide open because somebody has been brave enough to reach out and share what they knew with law enforcement. And so that can be critically important. So I think between law enforcement and the school environment, those would be two incredible resources. I would also invite anybody who wants to contact our foundation, joycesmithfoundation.com, or email us at info@joycesmithfoundation.com. We certainly have access to a host of resources and quite a broad network.
Oh,
And so if you are struggling to navigate the school or law enforcement, there might be an opportunity for us to lend some support to you and get you the help that you need as well.
That is
in
awesome.
when you mentioned the in school, that comes to a great help to myself actually in my line of work, because they can talk to the health nurse. And I've had quite a few patients, 13, 14-year olds. It was the health nurse who noticed something, and then the parent or guardian would then tell them to come to us so they could, seek help. So it's really good. And also we've had where they have refused to call RCMP because of previous experience. At the end of the day, what you said is we don't know. So it's best to still contact RCMP and the local authorities, because that might be the only source of help in that moment.
That's right. That's right. And, when it comes to health nurses, they can be a tremendous connecting point on these issues because they are connecting with teenage girls or boys that may
Mm-hmm.
be experiencing these repeated infections or other symptoms. And, that can really be a flag and an indicator that something is going on as well from that medical perspective. So often they can be a great connecting point to open up a dialogue with a child. But of course, they have all the confidentiality aspects.
Yeah.
Right,
Um,
right.
but that can be a very safe place for survivors or victims to be able to access resources as well.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much, Janet. I know it's not all negative, even though this is a really hard topic. But we also like to give our listeners hope. What is some of the positive experiences you've encountered with some of the survivors during their journey of healing? I know you have one or two up your sleeves. Something that can let the listeners know that it is not all lost.
It's amazing, actually, as we work with survivors through our empowerment program,
Mhm.
and as they start to grow in their knowledge and understanding about what's happened with them, and then they're
Mhm.
equipped with tools to move forward with rebuilding and restoring hope for their future. It's incredibly powerful. And we do have many, many cases like that, and many cases where, in fact, the survivors end up working and helping other survivors,
Yeah.
which is incredibly powerful. You know,
Mhm.
there's so much hope in this, even from a prevention standpoint. I'm blown away at the shift and change. Even when I go into schools, it's our favorite place to be. And when we
Mm,
go into schools and we're talking to these kids, you know, it's always done in an age appropriate way. And I was blown away recently with one grade 6 class, actually, that I was in visiting. And you might think that's young, but in fact, average age of entry that we've seen is 13 years of age. And so it's
Wow.
a very good time to be speaking with them in an age appropriate way. And I was blown away at the number of kids that were raising their hands because they already knew, they already had information. And that is such a shift. And that's powerful when we equip our kids with the ability to discern what's going on and give them the tools that they need to navigate the world when we can't be there to protect them. That's incredibly powerful. So that always uplifts me as well.
That
oh,
is awesome. So, one question. I have 13-year-old nieces, and from our culture, it is one of those things that used to be taboo. You don't talk about sex, you don't talk about aunties and uncles telling you to do things, or they always in that high esteem. Like, yes, it's changing now, but what would be one age appropriate thing I can give my 13-year-old niece today for it to trigger that awareness, or that, hey, this is not okay.
yeah, this is something that's
This
not
is
right.
something that
Yeah.
you should be aware of.
Well, one of the things I think we can start at any age, and this can be right from teeny tiny, is empowering our kids with the ability to say no.
Mm,
And empowering our kids with the ability to change their mind if they've said yes to something and then they don't feel good about it anymore. That is fundamental, and it can be done from a very early age in a very appropriate way. And as they get older, then it can apply in other areas.
Mm,
But consent is something that um, kids need to know that, in fact, they do have control over themselves and their bodies, and they have the ability to say no. It doesn't matter who it is.
mm,
And they also need to be empowered to talk to somebody if they don't feel quite right about something that's happened, because they won't be in trouble.
yeah,
And, you know, talk to that trusted person. It's okay. You know, if we could do those two things, I think we'd have a lot of different outcomes with our kids.
yeah.
that's really true.
That's really true. It is a thing. It is a thing. So, Janet, Thank you so very much. This has been a very impactful conversation for us. And I think it's a very good way to start the year in just raising that awareness with our audience and in empowering them to have a voice for themselves and for their children, and also equip the children, empower them to be able to say no and be able to. I know our culture is no means you disrespected me. But in where we are trying to navigate living in the society that we are, no can be done respectfully.
Mhm.
um so this has been really empowering, and knowing that it is not all lost. There is a healing journey, and also be able to recognize those red flags. We are hoping teachers can be able to speak up and be able to be that one source that can raise that red flag when they see it, or bring awareness to that red flag when they see it. And we hope that teachers are able to look out for those things that you've mentioned also. um, just to end this conversation, what is one thing you would like to tell our listeners that you would like them to take away? If nothing else, you would like them to take away from this conversation and just and bring hope to them that it is not a loss. That children have a place. They will be okay.
Yeah, I think the one thing I want everybody to know is that every single person listening can make an impact on this issue, and it is a
Yeah.
growing crisis. And
Mhm.
everybody, regardless of what their background or their education or their experience or their capabilities may be, has the ability to impact on this issue. We would love for people to follow us on social media, because that
Mhm.
will allow them to have access to current information as it becomes available. Go
Yep.
to our website, joysmithfoundation.com, because you can navigate to the Trafficking Signs campaign, and you can explore some of the red flags that we've been talking about more deeply,
Yep.
and so that you can grow in your own understanding of the issues. So that's what I would invite listeners to do. And thank you so much for having me today. I've enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you
Thank you
very much.
so
Thank
very
you
much
so
for
much.
coming. I just wanted to say that without knowing you, but every time you're talking, I can see your face light up. Obviously, there's some stress that comes with it because it's a lot of work, and also you probably, as a human being, sometimes get overwhelmed. But every time you're talking, you light up. You literally light up.
Mm.
And over 7,000 cases that the organization has worked on. We just want to say that we hope that you continue, and with obviously you're not the only one, but that this continues on and on, because it is a very good thing that you are doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's an honor to do this work absolutely every day. I'm inspired by those that we meet and have the pleasure of working with daily. So yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And listeners, visit joysmith.com. As she said, they have a lot of resources that you can have access to. It doesn't matter what religion, but they do also have Christian content, which obviously I'm sure our audience will be able to enjoy. They have Christian content. They have resources that you can download, and free resources as well that can help you start this journey and start the conversation. So make sure you visit joysmith.org. It will be down in the description and the show notes, so be able to access that. So thank you.